We're pretty good. Okay. Yep. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I'm Heather Farrell. I'm the curator of exhibitions here at BCA, and I am thrilled to have all of you. And we have a few more people coming, and we have a seat here, and a seat here, and a seat over here. It's wonderful to see such a great turnout. Well, we are all here tonight for our program, which is really a conversation about the current exhibition, Do We Say Goodbye? Grief, Loss, and Mourning. And as part of our programming for this show, we have put together an amazing group of, I want to say panelists, experts, artists, thinkers, facilitators to speak with us tonight. And before we get into that, I just wanted to share a little bit about the show that I began curating it about 2 years ago. And really, I was struck at the time by, this idea of grief in our culture today and how we processed it. And really how so often, even though it's a universal experience, it's something that we struggle with to communicate with others, to communicate even within our own families. uh, it's uncomfortable. And especially in our culture, it's a source of discomfort and apprehension for ourselves and others. And I thought, how can art, which we so often depend upon, maybe make a bridge for us to talk about this difficult subject? And I always love a challenge as a curator. And for me, I thought an exhibition about grief, loss, and mourning, definitely having a couple of great, as I say, anchor artists in mind, would be a way to connect with the community and be very relevant. And it just seemed especially relevant in the last few years, not only, personally and within our families, but also, through our community here in Burlington, maybe nationally, maybe globally. And so I sought to curate a relevant exhibit that explored these ideas through themes of memory, transformation, empowerment, and endurance. And my goal really was to create a safe space for people to come and reflect and maybe make a connection and really in some ways challenge the notion that with loss there's some kind of finality, that I really wanted us to embrace grief as a shared but also deeply personal journey. So with that introduction, I would love to welcome our guests tonight, as well as all of you in attendance. And first, to thank our facilitator for tonight, our clinical psychologist, Dr. Elizabeth Goldstein, who is the chair of VAPS, the Vermont Association of Psychoanalytic Studies, and she chairs the Applied Psychoanalysis Committee. And then also to thank our wonderful presenters on the left, Ernie Pomerleau, who is a valued community leader and has served on numerous nonprofit boards and is a supporter of both the arts and hospice care in Vermont, as well as in the center, Lydia Kern and John Killacky on the right. Both are artists in our current exhibition who have wonderful work in the show, and as I say, are my anchor artists for this exhibition. And then just a couple of housekeeping notes. This is a hybrid event. And so while we are here in person, we also have a Zoom audience. And so I need to give just a little bit of information on that format tonight. And so for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, please use the Zoom Q&A feature to pose your questions for the facilitator or our presenters. And then Jackie, our wonderful curatorial assistant, will pose the question for our on-site audience. And so we're going to do a little bit of a back and forth. And there is a chat feature as well if you want to leave a comment. And a reminder to everyone here in person as well as on Zoom that this is recorded and we do plan to post it on our YouTube channel. And so after this brief introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Goldstein, and she's going to introduce our speakers as well as help facilitate tonight's conversation, including like, as I mentioned, a back and forth series of Q&A because we want this to be a conversation, right? We'll pose a prompt, we'll talk among ourselves, and then we want to open it up to all of you to join that conversation. It's so important to have that dialogue. And so if you have a question, you want to make a comment, please raise your hand. We will bring the microphone to you because we are recording this so that we can capture your comments for the recording. And I think with that, I'd love to turn it over to Dr. Elizabeth Goldstein.
Thank you, Heather. I'm so grateful for all your hard work on this. And this is a great turnout. It's for a great show that has a lot of meaning and clearly a lot of meaning for a lot of people. I'm going to let actually each of the presenters introduce themselves. But before that, I wanted to share a definition of grieving. Sometimes people are not quite sure what the various terms around grieving mean. And I brought my favorite book these days on grieving called Advice for Future Corpses and the People Who Love Them, written by a former hospice nurse and a Zen Buddhist teacher. Grief is the internal experience of loss. Mourning is its outward expression. And together we call this bereavement, which is a wonderful word. Its root comes from the Old English berefien, which means to rob, to have something stolen from you. And individuals grieve in a number of different ways. And we grieve a lot of different things. I mean, this definition is about something being robbed from you. But it's also important to keep in mind that there's positive grieving too. We all the time make choices in our lives and decide to take path B instead of path A. And there might be the great choice. It might be the perfect choice in life, but there still can be a loss of path A not taken. And especially at certain times in our lives when we're older, and we start to look back maybe at the paths that won't be taken, it's natural for that kind of feelings of grief and loss to arise, but it's the evidence of a life worth living. So that's really the only thing I wanted to say. I mean, there's so much more on the topic, but I really want to have time for our presenters to introduce themselves. So if you can just take a minute and tell us why you are here on this panel today. Why don't you start, Don, since you're there, smiling.
Well, I'm very grateful to Heather for inviting me to be in this exhibition. I'm an artist, I'm an administrator, I was in the House of Representatives, but mostly for about 40 years I've been making work. And after the fall election, I just felt helpless. I'm 73, I'm queer, I'm paraplegic, and I felt all my friends were at risk. And so what I like to do in my work is to kind of invite community in and take action. And so I reached out to 16 friends and said, would they like to co-create a piece with me, and where we're going to reclaim body parts that we were afraid were going to be lost in these current times. And everyone chose their own body part, and it was cisgendered and trans folks, queer and straight, varying disabilities. Everybody chose whatever body part they wanted. And it became a very sacred experience for me to kind of have people claim this part. And I thought of it as a political act of affirmation that we as a community we're holding each other and finding that space. But as we filmed it and people chose their body parts, it really was for many about embedded pain or trauma that they had. And by sharing in such an intimate way, it became cathartic for them and for me as well. And it's very beautiful about that because when you see the bodies downstairs, they're beautifully shot. But these are bodies, the people are really have been damaged, or they're feared, or they're demonized, they're weaponized, they're politicized by the far right in this country. And so I really wanted it to be a piece that was not didactic. There's the only text is in the final end credits, and all it says is our differences reveal our humanity. And so everybody can kind of go into that space of looking at this collage of bodies that are quite different. And so that became the video component of the installation. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. And how about you, Lydia? What inspired you to
be
join this
here.
exhibition and be here on this panel?
Yeah. I'm so happy to be here with you all tonight. I see so many faces of people I love in this room, and it just means a lot. And I'm just grateful that people took the time to come to a conversation like this, and just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, all of us have our own grievances that are so personal. And so I'm sure we've all thought about people we've lost, things we're grieving this week, even in thinking about putting this on your schedule this week. So it's special to be in the room with all of those little moments. But yeah, I'm an artist, and I'm in the show.
That's
That's my work. It's been a real joy and honor to be a part of this show. And yeah, I'm here as an artist, but I'm also here as a community member. And I've been making work here for since 2011, I guess. And what really catalyzed my commitment to my practice was a deep experience of grief. It was about 10 years ago. I lost my younger sister. And so I think, and it was at the same time that I was studying social work at UVM. So I think a lot about how the systems that we live in echo personal, intimate moments and vice versa. And basically how we move through experiences in life that are beyond language, that are so deeply felt that they overflow the body. And yeah, I think that's all I'll say for now.
Thank you, Lydia.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here, Ernie. And what inspired you to join the panel tonight?
Good question. But first, I just wanted to say thank you for letting me participate with all of you tonight. And on Zoom, we all have a common human condition. It's grief, it's loss. None of us escape it. And I was so impressed with John and Lydia's work. It was very moving. I have a different modality. I lost a daughter, my beautiful daughter. And I've created some videos called Lessons from Jess, because I think there's lessons in transition. But I'm in real estate, but give you a little context of why I'm here and follow up with Elizabeth. 40 years ago, I started this journey of trying to understand life by understanding transition. I lost a sister to leukemia, and I was with her in her last moments, and I held her hand, and before I get into hospice, I felt like I talked her out of here, and I felt her energy, her life essence pass through me, expecting to feel sadness, expecting to feel remorse, expecting to feel trauma. I felt bliss, I felt beauty, I felt tranquility, and I felt love. My life changed at that moment. I then was asked to help start a hospice house in Williston. It's now in Colchester. I would tell you that my 40 years work in hospice has taught me more about spirituality than anything I could have ever learned in a book or any place else. I've also seen so many people go through fear, go through loss, and go through, Joyce, who's on Zoom and is here, and Heather, when we were talking, Heather just lost her husband. I just lost my daughter a few years ago. Joyce lost her son. And I could go around this room And nobody has escaped that, right? That's why we're all here. So I've seen signs constantly. There's an old saying, Wayne Dyer wrote, "You will see it when you believe it." And that's something that I really grabbed onto. I don't pretend to understand everybody's grief. I can't fix it. I can only share with you what I've done for my journey. I don't know your grief, but I know the intensity of your grief and how heart-wrenching it is and the pain that it evokes. Everybody processes it differently. I would share one last thing, that what I've learned is it's not, it's what you had, not what you lost. And that's really hard because we focus on the loss and we need to focus on the magic of what we had. And we have a human condition of darkness and grief. You can't move out darkness, you can only bring in light. You can't move out grief, you can only bring in love. So if you have a choice between darkness and grief or love and light, you choose love and light.
Thank you. That's a lovely sentiment. It just makes me think about how grief is really a reflection of the preciousness of what we have in our lives.
There's a saying, the more pain you had, the more love you had, the more grief you will experience.
Yes, yeah. That I was, as you were talking, I was thinking about how my patients, I've, most patients bring grieving into therapy sessions and at some point, and very often grieving is brought in a way where they don't know what to do with it. They don't know, maybe there's been suppression of the grieving. They're not quite sure even what grieving would feel like. Maybe they haven't cried in a while. There can be traumatic bereavement where there was trauma involved, which can make things really complicated. There can be feelings of guilt, anger. There can be a lot of complicated aspects of grieving. And even like I mentioned before, when it's not necessarily the death of a loved one, but could be a positive direction having gone and someone's gone in life, and finding it bizarre that they're even feeling a sense of loss when they've made what feels like a really good choice. So really what I want to ask all of you, and when I think about this art exhibition, what can art help us to understand? How can art comfort us? How can art help us process, experience what we're feeling, and perhaps express what we're feeling? And how can it help us as at a community level even? And that's a lot of questions. Take it however you want, okay? Why don't you start first, John, since you did before?
I started making videos in the 90s when my entire generation of gay men were dying from AIDS, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, we were bathing people, we were sitting with them, we were having memorial services or political funerals, but the magnitude was so profound that I really started creating videos. And the way I did this video in this, I invited friends to come in and we created pieces and we memorialized friends, lovers, partners, people whose bodies were discarded. And it was a way for me to mourn my friends, but it also was a way for me to survive. And when we made these films, they just seemed to be necessary actions to live. And I'm very grateful for is they found their way in the world. And, the Guggenheim Museum did a Fever in the Archives series. And suddenly I was an AIDS activist video maker. And it's like, well, this is great. And then the New York Public Library has a AIDS activist videotape collection. But all of that was grassroots people who picked up cameras who weren't filmmakers. we were making political work, we were making personal work, we were making work to live. And what was lovely about it is that it became a community of makers, and then it became almost like a genre, the act up aesthetic, the agitprop. And so it was lovely to watch that even now, 30 years later, those pieces of those many people were making this kind of work. So it was, and so it helped me, it helped my community, and it helped society deal with this. And then 30 years ago, I became paralyzed unexpectedly from surgery. And so suddenly I was newly disabled, and that was pretty mind-boggling. And the same thing, I started making videos, trying to grapple with my own body. And I invited friends in, and we did the same thing. We made videos. And then it is amazing how many disability film festivals there are in the world, all over the world. And so the same thing is, we took these tools, we took our bodies, we took political statements, and suddenly there was a community of affirmation. There's a community of shared interest. And then also, I think people became interested because they were so other of their own experience, because these were very myopic pieces. So as a maker, I make to survive. And then I love it when people like the work or respond to it. In one other example is in 2019, I worked with Eiko Otake, who's a choreographer, and we did a piece where we talked to our dead mothers. Very simple. It's very raw. We looked directly at the camera. We shot it at Vermont Public in one morning and edited it that afternoon. It made its way into the world in 2020 during COVID. And so Eiko and I made it about our mothers. 4 months later, people were watching it, and their grandmother or their grandfather was in the hospital dead from COVID, and they couldn't see them. Oh, and so it became a whole thing about trying to reach to family in death. And then we were invited in May to screen it in Minneapolis. And the night it was screened was 2 days after George Floyd had been murdered. In his last words, he called out for his mother. So for that audience to sit with Eiko and I talking to our dead mothers, it became, we all just sat together. And so I bring that up because many people have said this, but I like that. I attribute Marcel Duchamp, who says, a work of art is completed by the viewer. So as a maker, I can make something, but it's up to you all to kind of respond.
And here we all are today together. Lydia, as you respond, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the media and the methods that you used in your artwork. Like John, it's a real mixture of media. And the brilliant curator Heather Farrell made the comment to me that is one of the elements of this exhibition. So I wonder if you could add a little bit about that, like how the various media help you and what your thoughts are.
Sure. Yeah, I it's interesting thinking about the ways art can assist us with grieving, both like with the viewer, and it can act as this connective force with other people, but it also just personally, materials and the art making process has kind of been a raft for me in my life to go to places I couldn't go emotionally without assistance, material assistance. And in that way, I think about ritual. And it's interesting. I think what is true in the psychological, emotional, physical realm is also true in the material realm. And these things can teach us about emotional cycles can be revealed with the way materials transform. In the candle chair piece that I made called A Vigil, all the individual candles are brought, and then as time passes, they all kind of melt into one, and it's this like conglomeration of the personal experience echoing out to the whole, and how emotions can rip through the body. So I think that working in different modes can assist different types of emotional processing. Yeah.
Thank you. Ernie, I wonder if you have any thoughts on this?
Sure. First of all, I'm not an artist. I mean, I've done videos, and I did, like John, I kind of did it for the same reason. I had a tremendous amount of grief. I had done my own therapy around it. And my answers to a lot of their questions, they said, you should film this. I filmed it for me. It was cathartic for me. It was several hours of YouTube and pieces, but it turned out that I can use that and give it to parents who have lost a child. And the connectivity of somebody experiencing the loss of a child with me, having worked, you don't work through the process. Everybody says, oh, time heals all wounds. We all know it doesn't. The waves get further apart. It's how you process. But as John indicated, the viewing of art is a personal experience. And I watch people watch your two works, and I could tell everybody, it speaks to the heart. Grief comes from the heart to the heart. And I watch people process, but it opens you up and allows you to feel deeper. And I think that's the key to their art.
Yeah, just that brings to mind that I think our culture, by our culture, I mean American culture, that's very shaped by individualism, by white supremacy, by ecological, and all these forms of dominance, really. And that culture is really uncomfortable with the unknown and some things that are not commodifiable or quantifiable. And, people who are grieving and artists do not fit within this culture that, you need to produce or consume in order to have an identity under that framework. But grieving and being an artist makes you interface with the unknown. And that's really what materials have taught me. That's what the artistic process I think that's a big way that art can assist us and is teaching us ways to deal with being sensitive to change, and just having a place to gather around these things that there aren't answers for. Because when you're grieving, you're not a consumer or just an individual. You become a sister, a daughter, a friend. And when I'm in the studio, I'm in relationship to materials. And I think it's like that sort of relationality that a lot of our culture doesn't know what to do with. Because if we were more in touch with it, like that's a political thing. And now I'm really on a rant because all of these thoughts are connected for me. But I think that, experiences with grief and that sort of unknown space can really reveal the truth of the interconnection, because you don't, like you said, you don't grieve something unless you loved it or unless you were in connection to it. And so in that way, it's a really amazing, transformative, unifying force that says we all share this, like we will all die someday. And you radically change your value system when you reckon with your own death. It doesn't really work to value wealth accumulation when you know you're going to die someday. But I think art making can assist in that dealing with the unknown space that our culture is really uncomfortable with, and that it's too hard to go there alone. And I think that that's why ritual assists us and spaces like this assist us in going to these places that are so deeply felt, but sometimes you can't feel things. It's scary to feel pain. And I think that like space, art, and culture in this like lack of this like ritual void that we're living in this time, or, you know, I am with whiteness, like art and culture can be a remedy to that and a space to hold those things. So that was a lot of thoughts.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There's one comment I want to make, and then it's definitely time to open it up to questions. I'm sure you all have some good questions. I'm thinking about how some things are too big for one person to hold, and how expression through art is an opportunity for something to be held, whether you're viewing it or producing it or talking about it. It provides an opportunity for a net. You know, in Buddhist philosophy, they call it Indra's net, you know, that interconnectedness that we share. And that can really be comforting for people. For people on Zoom, Jackie's gonna read questions if there are any. And what about here? Does anyone have a question? I'll pass you the microphone.
So I'm wondering, I wouldn't consider myself an artist. I think maybe my mom would. I do paint sometimes, but when I feel like I have all these emotions, and then when I'm painting, it kind of like my mind sort of shuts off and my like body can kind of take over, and I don't really need to think about these things that are on my mind, even though they're present in my piece. I'm wondering, do you guys feel like us like similarly, or do you think that while you're creating, it's equally as painful as the loss you've experienced?
Okay. I think it's both. It's both and. I mean, it's it's like titration. You know, there's only so much you can feel at one time. But I think that I really love what you said about like you being in your body in the art making process. And I think like that's the unknown place, the place that is felt and somatic. And a lot of times my ideas will start from that place or are more musical or poetic, or it's like a feeling rushing through. But then I'm in the weeds of figuring out the logistics. I'm like, is this plastic a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch? And I love that because I need both, because I would go off the deep end if I was even more so than I already have, then if I was only in that the feeling felt place, you know. So I think in that way yeah, it's deeply both, but I think the materials can act as in the act of doing it, can act as a container to hold those felt moments. So it goes back and forth, and it's so awesome when they can be integrated. So yeah.
Other questions? Oh, go ahead, John.
I love the way you phrased it, you know, and I've made 21 different videos, and I'm always most interested in the next project. But I've made documentaries about a folk singer named Janice Ian, and I did a documentary about a photographer, Donna Ann McAdams, and I did a conceptual piece about the Fluxus art movement. And so it's whatever I'm next interested in. And right now I'm in love with, Larry, what's the name of the animal sanctuary? Merrimack is this incredible animal sanctuary. And I want to do a 4-channel installation of these animals that have had such an extraordinarily difficult life, who are very happy and being taken care of right now. And it's like an immersive thing of just the joy of these animals. So we're talking about grief and the framing of that, but I'm interested in just the next project, you know? So I love that you like stop your brain and you just go into it with your body and you go, because that's the thrilling part. You know, you just take that free fall.
Wait, there's a question from Zoom. Okay, microphone.
This question is specifically for Ernie from Wynn Smith. Ernie, can you speak a bit more about your feeling when you were holding your sister's hand and the energy that you felt?
Just be happy to win. That was a transformational moment for me. It was before I got into hospice, and before I read the Buddhist book of the dead, right? And just a little digression, but it'll come together. Buddhists believe that you cannot train to be a priest, right? Priestess, without spending 6 months with people who are dying. They feel strongly that until you understand death, you cannot understand life. And I hadn't had that information, although somewhere inside of me, I must have had it. Holding my sister's hand, and knowing at 23 years old, she was about to pass. And I was giving her permission to pass. I'm not even sure where I got the words, but that's part of hospice, giving you permission to let go. And at a younger age, and she was 23, I held her hand and I said, Ellen, it's time. You can go. We've supported you. You need to now support us. And in that second, well, it was more than seconds, I felt this incredible wave of energy. And my expectations, I think I'm repeating myself a little bit, but answering Wynn's question, I expected to have severe sadness, loss, anger, all these things. I'm experiencing a transcendent experience of bliss, of beauty, of peace, of tranquility. And I was a little bit of at a loss for where that all came from. But at that moment, 40 odd years ago, I lost my fear of death and it has never come back. That was the gift that I got at that moment. The further gifts is, and I think we're all in, we're all here in earth suits and earth school, right? Learning the lessons that we're supposed to learn. And it's like somebody said, when the teachers, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Teachers started to appear. And from my sister Ellen's experience, I got a call from people that were starting hospice. I mean, we had home hospice, but we didn't have residential hospice. And I thought I had 100 other things to do, but I remember saying yes. And so that journey to me was life transforming. And so the experience from that moment of losing my sister, and then I lost my sister Anne Marie, and then we've all lost many friends, many of whom I was with in hospice holding their hand. So that was the stimulus for a transition in my life. But it was a magical moment. And we all have those, what the Japanese call satori moments, moments that you cannot feel more alive. That was a satori moment for me and a transitional, life-changing event.
Thank you. Oh.
Hello, this has been really wonderful and thought-provoking so far. I'm just curious, yourself as artists, what is your relationship to destruction? For myself as an artist, I strive for like permanence. So if art is completed by us viewing it, do y'all ever create but then destroy as its own catharsis? Thanks.
Who wants to take that one?
Well,
You're on.
I have a big smile on my face because when you go downstairs, you'll see my piece. It has the video that I've described, but there's a burlap floor piece, and then there's this, which is my death mask. And what I did with this is we took it was from another video about chronic pain, and we took my face from that. We put it on the fabric, and then we dyed it a couple of times to make the face recede And then I put latex on the back of it, and it still wasn't destroyed enough. So we took a blowtorch and we blew the edges out. And it was originally at the fabric workshop, and it was going to be up for 9 months. And I said, well, the whole point of putting the latex on is for it to disintegrate during the run of the exhibition. And they said, okay. And I said, and we'll just throw it out at the end. Well, then Heather invited, and I thought, oh my God, what are we going to do? This death mask is going to survive. But the latex held up. And then it closes here, January 25th, and she has to overnight express it to West Virginia. So this thing that I didn't expect to live, and I wanted it, I thought I designed it to completely fall apart. It is going to fall apart. And when you see it, it's pretty ripped up now, but that's how it's supposed to be. And then the floor piece is, when we were at the fabric workshop, I looked up and I saw they had this burlap to wrap landscape in. And I said, oh, let's put the text on that. And they said it was all dirty. And I said, that's perfect. It's just perfect. So it's all stained and it's kind of ripped. And again, it wasn't ever meant to be like in a collection. It's like almost at the end, I just thought it would be tossed out, but now it has to be overnighted to West Virginia again. But it'll be so tattered. So intentionally, I made those impermanent.
Thank you. Lydia, do you want to reply to that also?
Sure. There are some pieces that I make that I also really like my blowtorch. Fire and transformational forces are interesting. I've made some works that part of the performance is that they are lit and they go away. But then I was making those sorts of works at the same time as working on the public sculpture that just got installed on Main Street. And it is quite literally, as permanent as we can get. I did so much research on UV resistance and weather and trying to make something stay, which is a futile act as human beings. Everything is permanent. But it was interesting because that became part of the meaning too, is this act of preservation, like preserving these plants that are on their way out, but that liminal space ends up meaning something. But yeah, I totally think that the creation destruction thing is just part of the cycle. I think that's why I've always loved the metaphor of compost piles. It goes back in and it makes the soil richer and we can grow from that. So I think that's true in the studio too. Like all of the bad ideas and failed attempts go into the new work. So, but it's so humbling though, failure, and which is a type of loss. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Robin Lloyd here. I've been thinking as an elder, I've been reading Carl Gustav Jung and his view of aging and of the end of life. So I'm looking at this sort of from the other side of what we're officially talking about, but that all of you need to create, pull together the strings of your life, look at it, see the value in it, and weave it together so that it satisfies you, and show it to your friends, whatever it is, whether it's artwork or just thinking or whatever. But I think Jung has some very interesting and profound comments for us at this stage of life.
Thank you so much. It makes me think of your comment about composting, that there's a, energy created from any of our actions that can be then used to create.
John, now for me, there's no such thing as closure. But let me go, end of story, but let me go beyond that. we knew people or knew of people in the 80s and 90s who had died of AIDS. And their send-off at that time, as I recall, quite often was known as a celebration of the life of, rather than a funeral, memorial service. And often highlighted by, well, humorous anecdotes, video, which one hadn't seen, photographs, and so forth. So my question is, I think that practice persists to this day with some people for whom it is their will. To such an ending, is such an ending to you as one who lost friends, to the family, and to the person who is facing death, therapeutic in your opinion? Thank you.
Is it therapeutic for me as being a member of the community with the person dying in their family?
Family, friends, for the person who is in the process of dying, knowing that those arrangements have been made. Or is it
in college, I worked as an orderly. And so I often at night would actually be sitting bedside of someone who was dying. And they didn't know it was me. They were speaking in their first language, and I was a family member. I was a son. I never knew who I was really, but I would sit there and people would do that. When people would die in the hospital, it was my job to clean them up before the families came. And then after the families came, I had to bring them down to the morgue. And so I got very used to the body. And so as my friends and families were dying of AIDS, it was the same thing. I was cleaning the bodies, I was holding the bodies, I was cherishing the bodies, I was mourning bodies, but they were bodies ultimately. And for me, the memorial services, as you remember, were quite operatic, but they were political, and they were almost more for us that remained than for the person. That we were kind of defiant, and we wanted joy, and we wanted how quirky this person was, but it was for us to feel alive. So I guess it was therapeutic. I don't know if I answered your question, but okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hi, I'm so excited to be in conversation with you all about this and with everybody. I'm also interested in the topic of grief, and I'm also an artist. And in my research and the work that I do, I often think about collective grief and community grief. But I'm also thinking about the role of the artist as an individual, and then being in community, and then also thinking about grief as being individual, but also collective. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that both as humans and artists.
I love that question, Jen. I think one of my favorite parts about making work that is personal is like, because it offers the opportunity for the personal to be pulled out to the universal. And, the personal being political, like John is talking about. But I think ultimately, with experiences of deep emotion or deep grief, we just really need to feel like we're not alone. And I think that art can be a way of, that act of externalization can do that. And yeah, I don't know if that fully answered, but that's what comes to mind. What about you, John?
Well, Jen, I was blessed with you and with Erica Miller, who's also in the room. I invited them to be in this piece that I made, and it was really a co-creation. It wasn't me as director saying, people chose their body part, and then some people weren't interested in being in the piece. So at the end of the time, I had 17 different people that I collaged together. And if it was 18 or 16 or 15, it would have been different. And so what was lovely about it was in editing it, it was that the piece became only who was in the piece, that it was a community effort. And so to me, that was really important, because that's what I needed. And the impulse was is to be held and feel safe with other people that were different in this Trumpian nightmare that we're living in. And so that to me was really important.
Thank you, John. We have a question from Zoom.
We have a question and a comment, but they both dovetail. So I'll share the comment first from Cindy Cook. It's echoing John's remarks. A dear friend says, quote, "There's nothing quite as life affirming as being with someone who is dying," end quote. And then a question for John specifically from Ashley O'Brien. You mentioned that you and the makers in your group during the AIDS epidemic almost created a genre of art. Do you think that this era of grief has a broader impact on queer art culture?
Well, thank you, Ashley, for the question. Here's how I would answer it right now, is that an incredible new film by Angela Matson, who's a trans filmmaker in our community. Eli Clare is a poet in our community who just published a new book. He's a genderqueer man with who's disabled. And so I think that voices from the margin are going to become ever more fierce. And I think as the trans and the whole DEI madness and the really obliteration of the trans identity is sweeping our nation, I think artists are going to be more powerful with that. And change happens from the fringe and everything. So I actually think this is going to be a very exciting moment where finally, everything's lost. So we're going to come up with and respond. And so I'm really interested in that kind of work. I just did a book review of Catherine Opie, who is a photographer who initially started doing scarification on her back, and now she's in museums all over the world. And this was a one-person show in Brazil, and it's all coming from a leather dyke community. That's Kathy's community, and that's what she's. And it's so powerful, but it's so myopic that it becomes resonant for all of us to see inside a different world. That it's not my world. So I learned from that. I learned from Matson's films. I learned from Eli Clare's writing. So that's what I'm interested in, is to see those kinds of artists from the fringes.
Thank you. We have time for probably 2 more questions. We want to leave a little room so that you can walk through. There's this person raised their hand first. So you can walk through the exhibition until 7:30 if you want to.
Hello. I'm wondering, I have a question about what advice that you would give to somebody who feels paralyzed by their grief and wants to use art as a way to process and as a way to, feel those emotions, but just doesn't really know where to begin.
You for that question. The first words that come to mind are just a low bar, like doing things that are really accessible. It was like the few months after I lost my sister, I would go on walks, and I have this really clear memory of walking around downtown, and I would make designs actually in City Hall Park in the snow with my feet. And that was what was accessible to me at that moment. And yeah, so I don't think art has to be, I think broadening the idea of what art making is. And I think it can just be a shift of perspective and also just a really deep gentleness with yourself, having a severe gentleness towards yourself when you are in that space of paralysis. And just reminding yourself that it will change and that, yeah, just like, you know, the reality of death, it's like no feeling is final. And that's the beauty about the art making, accessing grief through art making, is it can meet you wherever you are. So yeah.
Thank you. Would either of you like to respond to that?
Yeah, if I could. I've used videos, but what I would say is that it's imperative, be gentle to yourself. I mean, I would have to repeat that because it's so hard to be in grief and in darkness, and anger will come up. We know that. We know grief. We feel totally lost. I would share with you that one of the strategies that I've used is to just see my daughter in unconditional love. I don't use any metaphors of heaven and all these other things. It's just she's residing in unconditional love. And so I have spent time thinking about all the magic that she was in my life. I wouldn't give up 1 minute of the pain in trade for 1 minute of the love. And so be gentle to yourself. Find ways to honor the transition and the person that you lost. It's a lot of work, but you can create legacy. But live in love, live in caring, be gentle to yourself, and see the magic that I am a father, I am a different person, I act differently, my emotions are different because of my daughter. Is it a horrific loss? Beyond comprehension to me, as I'm sure your loss is. But I think if you spend time recalling the magic that that entity, that individual was in your life, and spend less time on the tragedy of the loss, it'll help you. It won't ever stop. Even 5 years out, there's times when I feel paralyzed. It doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. But at the same time, you catch yourself and you go, I loved her so much that that pain is so real even to today. And I kind of try to celebrate that. So anyway, I'm not sure that helps, but that's just a reflection of my insights of what I do with my loss.
Thank you.
I never know what I'm making, but I really, I was paralyzed after Trump was elected. And it was, so how can I take action and be in community? And I would say that if that's sort of how I make work, and this piece I made, I had no idea what it was for or how I was going to put it together. I had no idea what it would be. So to me, it's important that just whatever the action is, and it's in community. And it's the same thing as when we go to our protests. We're taking action and we're in community, so we feel less powerless.
Sure. Do you have a?
I'd like to say something about the word art, which I find intimidating because I'm not an artist. And I hear the word art and that tells me that I should create, and I'm not good at that. And yet I would like to use a creative process to process my grief, which never goes away, you're right. So I would like to know how people like me can actually utilize art. How do you define art to use it in a way to process grief?
That actually is what I was going to talk about in my concluding remark. So, what I'm wondering is if, maybe I'll just share that now. I mean, I see the time, so we do have time for one more question. So this person raised their hand for, Fran, is that, okay, thank you so much. So why don't we pause on that? I'll give my concluding remarks around that, and you can ask one last question.
Goodness. It's kind of adjacent to this question that this gentleman just had, but I'm interested in, all three of you are willing to sit with your grief and to sit with death, and many in our culture are not. And maybe even related to this woman who's thinking, what is the art that I can use? And I don't know if you sit with it long enough, there may be catharsis, but I'm interested in the process of sitting with grief and with loss, and where that takes you, and maybe even knowing when to move beyond that, as Ernie has just helped us with.
Do any of you want to reply to that?
Fran, in that, I'm going to share a story. So I remember losing a dear friend and having the same experience that I had with my sister. And I was at hospice and I was working with some of the volunteers and the nurses up there. And I said, you know, I think I connected to the same intensity of emotions that I felt at the birth of my daughter. And they looked at me and they smiled. They said, let me introduce you to several OBGYN nurses that work here. They started and I talked to them and they said, we spent the first part of our life celebrating the birth coming in. We're now celebrating the birth going out. So that context is a fascinating feeling for me, which I actually had felt and was put into words. I find that love is a very powerful, it's the biggest main earth word I can come up with. And I reside in that, and that helps get me through. And death is an unknown, death is a fear, death is questionable. You go into it, you look at it, you feel it, you think about it, and you study it. And it transitions. And as the Buddha said, you've got to really study. We're all in transition. We lose our looks, our money, our jobs, our spouse, everything. We lose ourselves. So we hide from that. And the sooner we start to look at that as part of this simple life conditions, it's nothing out here. It just becomes here. Once you view it, it disappears and you live your life normally. So if in a loss, I have just gone in and celebrated the relationship that I had and that I was different because of these people in my lives.
Anyone else?
I think what comes to mind when I think about having capacity to sit with different emotions is a lot of times I've needed a friend to do that with. I think not being alone, and I think about disclosure and what feels like safe disclosure with certain friends. Yeah, I just sometimes I'm better able to access my own feelings or my own grief when I'm witnessed by someone else, by a friend. And I think, yeah, and that is a risk sometimes, but I think being in intimate relationships with whether it's friends or family members and talking about it is a start. And like I said, like the low barrier to the art making and reading other people's work about grief is so helpful. I I listened to Sufjan Stevens' album Carrie and Lowell over and over again for years because for a while it was the only thing that could tap the same emotional core that I was experiencing. And it was comforting in that way. And it kind of became like a hype album in the studio. And everyone was like, it's so sad. I'm like, it just makes me feel not alone. And it helps me move through things. So I think with all of these things, it's not that binary. It is of like good, bad, or sad or joy. Like you're talking about, it's one and the same. But yeah, I think reading the work of others or listening or looking is a helpful access point.
John, do you want to say anything?
I look back at some of my earlier work as I was putting my thoughts together for tonight. And I made an AIDS video in 1996. It was called Walking with the Dead. And it ended with these words: I hold on to all of them, my dead. They are my mandala. Telling their unfinished stories affirms my own life. I walk among them and live. So that's how I would answer you.
Thank you for that. Thank you all so much. As in my concluding remark, I was thinking a lot about what you were talking about. You know, how can you use art to help you process grief if you're not an artist? And I think that's one of the things that I have really appreciated about doing this collaboration on this art exhibition with Heather, is to see how the curatorial process can bring things together. The collaboration itself, I feel like there was working through of things. But I came and viewed the exhibition, not on opening night because I was actually at a funeral and giving a eulogy. So I missed that. But I came the next week with a dear friend who she lost her husband this time of year, and I lost my mother this time of year. And we together went through the exhibition. And that experience was so powerful. We came in on a quiet day. And ever since doing that, and then having some discussions like this around the exhibition, I've just felt like whole cities I didn't know I had open up in my mind. You know, creativity, to weave in a psychoanalytic concept, this idea of containing grief. You know, grief sometimes takes a large container and many people to hold. And that's what we're all doing here. We're holding something together. The exhibition is holding something together. It's a container. And we do that in order to make meaning. And that is a creative process. And we can do that in all kinds of ways. So even if you're just an artist in your own mind, creating ideas in your mind, there's creation happening there. So thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for a lovely exhibition. Thank you all.
I just mention Jordan Douglas is here. Jordan, would you stand up a second? And his work is downstairs as well. It's really beautiful. So on your way out, go stop with him.
Yeah, and Heather wants to say some concluding words.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. And thank you, Dr. Goldstein. Really, all of you, it's been a privilege and a pleasure to work with you on this exhibition. And exhibitions such as this would not be possible without the amazing community that we have in Burlington. And as well as, I have to say, the community we have here at BCA. And I'm seeing a lot of you here in the room. Thank you, Jackie, our amazing curatorial assistant and Zoom queen tonight. Rebecca Schwartz with Art from the Heart, one of our internal programmatic partners, and all the important work you do at the hospital. To our amazing communications team, Elena and Ted, who are here, our development team, Sarah and Doreen. You know, sometimes it looks beautiful and simple on a wall, but it takes so many people and so many amazing talented artists and community members and partners to bring it all together. And I'm very grateful for all of you. And in addition to these amazing internal partners, we also have the community. And I really want to make a point to thank the Maslow Family Foundation, Bill Gottsman and Deborah Lopez Gottsman, as well as Ernie Pomerleau, and especially our other partners with the Vermont Arts Council, National Endowment for the Arts, and then programmatic partners like for tonight and the wonderful response labels you see in the show, VAPS, the Vermont Association of Psychoanalytic Studies. And Elizabeth, one day I will get that all right in the correct order. Not yet. Everyone tonight, and I hope you stay a little bit longer, see the exhibition, talk more with all of our amazing artists, and thank you again.
I'd invite you We talked about the art of presentation. Song is an art. I'd invite you to listen to Willie Nelson's "You Don't Get Over, but You Do Get Through. The End is Not the End." But have some tissues with you. It's a very powerful song. You'll love it. And thank you for sharing that, Heather.
Thank you, everyone. And then other order of business, there are audience surveys underneath your chairs, strategically placed, in case you would like to fill those out for us. That's very helpful.